I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD, BlenderHD. You know, follow me on Twitter. And it's Monday, October 28th, and we'll be taking a quick review of yesterday's Week 8 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings. So hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. Hit that thumb button. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit my cough. Hit my chest. Hit my notification bell. Hit everything. Hit everything on the screen to always know when we go live. Remember, later today, we got NBA. NBA is back. So we got Grinders Live, 5 p.m. Eastern, followed by Crunch Time. Obviously, NBA, a lot of moving parts. So they'll keep you up to speed on what's going on for the NBA slate tonight. We also got Monday Night Football. We got a pre-lock show after that. So if you want to get your showdown content, tune into that, as well as subscribe to RotoGrinders here. We got a combo light package now that instead of getting everything for all the sports, you can get the 4 major sports: MLB, NFL, PGA, NBA, for Sim Labs, as well as our expert written content for one low price of $39.99 a month. So click that link in the description for more information about that. And it's Monday, so we bring in James McCool. It's Mondays with McCool, the co-author with me on the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. So, James, how was your National Tight End Day?
Fun fact, I did not play this week. I didn't play this week.
Your microphone is a little bit garbly. I don't know why, but what are you on vacation or something?
No. Is it still gargly?
Just a little bit.
A little bit. Hold on.
Well, yesterday was National Tight End Day, so if most of this first part of the season, we were bemoaning the fact that tight ends weren't producing anything, and then they decided, since it was their day, they're going to come in and yeah, I mean, even when we look at the screen, I'll bring this up as James fixes his microphone. We go by position, just tight end, and sort by points here in Results DB, which is free on RotoGrinders. You can get rotogrinders.com/resultsdb. We had 1, 2, 3, 4 tight ends that got at least 20 points, and a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 tight ends scored double digits. So, James, you obviously played 2 tight end lineups in GPPs, because that is traditionally the ceiling way to build lineups, which I'm actually being very sarcastic. But yeah, if you played a tight end yesterday and they didn't get at least 10 points, then you probably didn't do all that well.
Yeah, you were shot. Is Mike better now?
Yeah, you're better now.
Probably a little bit better. Cool. Okay, so I didn't play mostly because I was just overloaded from NBA. Opening week of NBA is a lot, and I just needed a break. So we went for a drive instead, and I relaxed. Just quick message to everyone: it's okay to skip slates if you're feeling just shot. I just wasn't in the mindset that morning.
Also, James, as you play contrarian. You probably save yourself a lot of money. You can see here on Results DB, whenever you see, because what it shows here, for people that don't know, like, I have it sorted by points, but you could sort by ownership. This is the milli, by the way. We always kind of show the milli here, but you could switch between whatever contest you want. We have all the DraftKings information. You can go back to the previous weeks also, not just yesterday. You go to main slate, early slate, afternoon slate. But these green numbers, it shows how many points they scored. And this is like the ownership, but this is like what percentage of top 20 percentage lineups had that player? What percentage of 1% finishing lineups had that player? When you see a lot of green in the highest owned, the highest owned players also made up a large percentage of the top 1% lineups. You know that you needed to play a bunch of chalk in order to pretty much do well. And leading that board was the chalkiest player on the slate, $3,500 Cade Otton, who turned into Rob Gronkowski on the Buccaneers and scored 2 touchdowns and 29 fantasy points. And if you said, hey, I'm going to get different, you actually made, if you take a look at tight end, if you're like, well, I'm going to play David and Joe, I'm going to pay up a little for David and Joe. Well, he scored 17. So top 1% of lineups, still 21% of lineups had that. And like, as long as you got, if you play Kyle Pitts or Travis Kelce or Sam Laporta or Trey McBride, or you just needed a tight end that scored a decent amount of points. But one of the easiest spots to fade, if you want to say, like if I told you, James, that Kate Otten would be 35% owned at 3,500.
Yeah.
You probably would have said, well, I'm just going to get slightly different at tight end because tight end position is typically a low opportunity cost position that is very highly variant, a little bit closer to defense. I'm pretty sure that your 3 lineups that you play in like the power sweep, you probably wouldn't have had them.
So actually, I probably would have done okay. I probably would have been fine. I thought that Joe Mixon and Javonte Williams were the best plays on the slate in a vacuum. Those 2 and Tyreek Hill. So I would have had all 3 of those guys. I said in most of my writing, I wrote up Kate Otten in 2 spots. I thought that he was a really, really good play. I didn't have a problem with it. I did say that I wasn't like slotting him in at first, but if I landed on him, whatever. Like I thought that he was in comparison to like the Tucker Kraft stuff from a couple weeks ago, Kate Otten was a considerably better play. So I didn't have too big of an issue with that. And actually, my main thing for this week was that I thought that correlation heuristics were something that we could kind of ignore this week, and that double tight end was fine to build. So I probably would have had like a good amount of Kate Otten plus David Njoku, Kate Otten plus like, Trey McBride or something like that. If I'd have been focused on that game, like I probably would have had some 2 tight end builds around Kate Otten. So I probably would have done fine. There were a lot of screenshots from the Patriot community based on the content. So I think I probably would have been okay, which maybe I shouldn't take slates off because I'd have been fine. I would have built the game stack that I wanted to do was Cleveland, Baltimore with Kate Otten. So I probably would have just won everything. But here we are. I took a drive and looked at leaves instead.
Well, I did well yesterday. Cashed on FanDuel, my cash lineup. Crushed DraftKings cash. Made money in GPP. I mean, I made like $150, but I mean, the big positive in GPP is always a plus. If you played cash games on DraftKings yesterday and didn't play the 173.16 train, you're bad at DFS. You're just bad at it. I mean, it's kind of like if you saw in like the massive double. I mean, I could show it here. We have the massive double up here because I thought it was quite clear. I mean, you could see. I mean, take a look at like all the chalk or whatever. There was one line. Let's see. I mean, I could get to what? Can I type in my own name? Right. So we look at lineups. I mean, if you did not play this lineup, I mean, I thought it's quite obvious. And so did so many other people. It was Bo Nix, Breece Hall, Devon Achane, Chase, Hill, Tillman, Otten, Williams, Atlanta defense. If your lineup was nowhere close to this, stop playing double ups because you're not good at this. But basically, in order to get Chase and Hill in there, you had to play, the Bo Nix. You couldn't play Mixon. You couldn't even play like McMillan. You played Tillman instead at 3,300, and obviously he smashed. But take a look at these ownership numbers. 42, 71, 33, 35, 68, 43, 73, 61, and 19. And just to show when James, people tell me in 2024 that cash games are dead. Like, what's the point of playing cash games? Everyone kind of knows what they're doing, right? I mean, come on. Who's playing double ups and head to heads and right? 2024. I heard that in 2019 also. I heard that in 2021. Tyreek Hill at 7,000. I know he only scored 13 points, 6 for 72 or whatever. And this is the big, massive single entry $25 double up was 68% owned. That means 32% of people said, nah, I'm not going to play 7K Tyreek Hill in cash. So there's 30% of people out there that just, I mean, come on. I mean,
they just don't know how to play cash games. No, I'm totally with you. The one difference that I had in the cash core that I built was Iosivas over Cedric Tillman. And if I'd have known that Cedric Tillman was going to be considerably higher owned, I would have played Cedric Tillman, but I didn't think he was going to be 43% owned in cash games. I didn't really see that coming.
So getting to GPP. So we're looking at the Millie now. Let's go by the running back position, because a lot of times what we talk about on these review shows is, had we known this player would be this owned, would we have played more or less of them? I mean, obviously you could play an over-owned player as long as you build your lineup around the fact that the player is over-owned. These are all high projected players typically. But how you build your lineup. If you're like, oh, I'm going to play, some sneaky guy that I project to be 5% owned here, so I could play, a chalk running back combination. Well, if that guy ends up, instead of being 5% owned, being 21% owned, well, then he screwed up, right? Like that's kind of, you're trying to build a combination of projection, correlation, and leverage for these GPP lineups. And SimLabs here at RotoGrinders kind of does that work for you. So definitely sign up for a RotoGrinders premium account below. Click on that link in the description. But Breece Hall led the way in ownership, 30%. Javonte Williams, 29%. And then I find the surprises I had at running back were, I did not expect Kareem Hunt to be the third highest owned running back at 24% owned. I played 20 GPP lineups, James. I was way under on Breece Hall and Javonte Williams because I projected them to be around 30% owned.
Yeah.
And maybe this is the byproduct of people thinking the same way the GPP players. My two highest exposed running backs were Kareem Hunt and Joe Mixon. Because I had Kareem Hunt at like 12 or 13% owned and Mixon at like 16-ish, 17% owned. Because I think I had more people playing Chase and Tyreek Hill, which means it was very hard to get up to Mixon at 7,700. And I had more people playing Achane. Like I had Achane as like up in the Hall Williams kind of range. Dobbins I had about where he came in at 15. And then I played the guys that I played I want to say the most of, but I made sure to play a bunch of Bijan. He came in at 8%, which is exactly what I thought. I thought it would be single digit. James Conner, who I thought would be single digit, and Josh Jacobs single digit, and they came in where I expected them to come in. The surprise was that at the similar price point, I just thought more people would play Achane than Hunt, but maybe it was more of a byproduct that more people were playing the passing stacks and they didn't want to play running back and wide receiver together. I don't know. How did you project before the slate the running backs?
I mean, running back ownership seems like it was pretty much in line. Outside of Kareem Hunt, you're right. Kareem Hunt is the one that jumped up. And I do think that it was mostly people using whatever tools that they use and getting a whole bunch of Tyreek Hill and saying, okay, well, if I have Tyreek Hill, I don't want Devon Achane. I think that was mostly what it was. So if people were doing that, and to be fair, I had Devon Achane projected for 20% ownership. He came in at 19% ownership, but I did not have Kareem Hunt at 24. I had him at 10. So, is what it is. I think that there was a lot of steam on Kansas City kind of laying a beat down on Las Vegas later on towards the slate. But yeah, Kareem Hunt was kind of really the only guy that was like way out of left field, which is nice because usually we have like 2 or 3 guys that are just like, where did that come from? And this week we only have Kareem Hunt. And I thought that Kareem Hunt was a good play in a vacuum, regardless of ownership. I did not think that he was a 24% owned. We should just like lock this guy in play, but I thought that he was fine. So I'd have made the same decision that you did. I think if I had more than like 5 lineups, since I would have only had 3 lineups, I would have just been on, Javonte Williams, Devon Achane, and Joe Mixon. That pretty much would have been who I played. I didn't really see a reason to go. I did like Kenneth Walker as well at lower ownership, but that ended up not panning out. So I thought ownership made sense.
Wide receiver position. In my 20 lineups, maybe it's kind of weird. I was saying on shows all of last week that Tyreek Hill 7,000. I mean, he should obviously be 8,500 to 9,000 with Tua back, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, he's underpriced. Scorer Patrol was like, he's playing a lot of Tyreek Hill. He's underpriced. My number one concern was we had him projected to be, I think our projected ownership was 27%. And maybe it ended up being 29, but like around like in the high 20s. And I was listening to podcasts all week, watching shows all week. Like there was no one that was saying like, well, like it's like everyone is like, well, Tyreek Hill is obviously underpriced. I'm just gonna play a lot of them. I'm gonna like this. I don't care what his ownership is. I'm just gonna play a lot of them. I'm just gonna play a lot of them. So when the algorithms, the computers that don't know irrational human behavior are saying that that no, Tyreek Hill is going to be about 27% owned. I'm like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you, computer. I think he's going to come in at like 40. I would not be shocked if in the large field GPP, you open it up, to turn over the cards, and he's 43% owned. Like I was saying, like if he actually was coming in at 27% owned, I may play him in almost all my lineups. So you know what I did, James? I played him in 2 out of 20 lineups because I thought he was going to be like 40+% owned. And then he comes in at 29.3% owned. And when the cards flipped up at 1 p.m., I'm like, I think I made a mistake. I wish and obviously now, I mean, he only scored 13 points, so it ended up being a good thing for me. But like that was the oddest thing. And Chase came in at 18% owned, and I don't think he would have been nearly as owned if Higgins was in. But it's not like, I mean, take a look here. Like Drake London was 12% owned, and I made sure to play a bunch of him. I was on Bijan in London. I had Cousins. We'll talk about the stacks in a little bit. And then I basically spread out my exposure of like the most of Tillman, but I had some McMillan and Yoshivas as like fillers. Like kind of like one of these three guys may do well. I just fill them in when they could be filled in. And I really don't want to have two of them in my lineup.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, the Tyreek Hill thing, Jalen McMillan ended up being the chalkiest out of like the 3K value options. And the only thing when I opened this up this morning, the only thing that I thought was odd was Rashad Bateman being the 6th highest owned receiver when I didn't even consider him. I mean, I guess these are Lamar lineups that needed a cheap wide receiver instead of the McMillans and the Tillmans and the whatever. But yeah, that was the only shock. And then the ownership of the Packers guys being like twice as owned as, like, we'll get the quarterback. Jordan Love was the highest owned quarterback. And then we see Jaden Reed is 12%, and Romeo Dobbs was 10% owned. And I had Reed at like 9 and Dobbs at like 3 or something like that. Yeah, and I mean Waddle's here at 15% owned. That makes sense. What are your thoughts at wide receiver? And did I make a boo-boo by? I mean, I can't like. What did I have to download the CSV and see like what do some of these lineups look like when Tyreek Hill is less than 30% owned on a slate where it was so obvious that he was underpriced for his ceiling that he didn't hit? Or did people just like, did people do the thing where they hear what we always say not to do, where, oh, Tyreek Hill is going to be so chalky that I'm just going to fade him. Right. And it's like, well, it's not whether or not he's chalky. It's whether or not he's over-owned or under-owned relative to his ceiling projection at that ownership. And people just heard all that week, everyone talk about Tyreek. And it's like, I'm just going to play Waddle instead. Or I'm just going to play Achane instead. Or I'm just going to fade the Dolphins totally instead because everyone is talking about them. So, like, oh, he's probably going to be 50% owned, and I'm just going to X him out. Right? Like, I didn't do that, but I mean, I kind of did that.
How owned was Tua?
Not Not yeah, he was the second highest. He had 9.5% owned.
So I think that there's two different things that went on here. I think that the first thing is that people will naturally pair Tyreek Hill with Tua if they're feeling confident in the stack. And I think that Tua only being 9% owned at 6,100 is a show of lack of confidence from the industry that he was actually going to be okay. So like if he has 15% ownership instead, which I think was completely feasible at 6,100, I think that he carries a lot more Tyreek ownership with him. And then that's when we see Tyreek hit that 35 to 40% range. The other thing that I think happened was that that Devon Achane and Tyreek Hill combo right there, 3.6% of the field. I think that a considerable amount of people who played Devon Achane did not also want to play Tyreek Hill in that lineup. So like, even though it makes up 3.6% of the field, Tyreek Hill was 30% owned, Devon Achane was 20% owned. So there's a lot of overlap there that did not happen. And those two lineups are kind of split, right? So I think that Devon Achane took away 5 to 10% of Tyreek Hill's ownership. So when you combine both of those things, people were scared to use Tua and people didn't want to play him with Achane. I think that that's at least 15% ownership that was lacking based on what we could have expected from Tyreek Hill. I think that's what happened.
Right. Enough. The key point is enough people, because plenty of people did do that, but not enough, not as much as expected.
Right.
See here in the team stack combo page on Results DB, Tua plus Hill comprised 2.4% of the field. Tua plus Hill plus Waddle was 1.8% of the field. So like you combine them together, and that's still 4.2% of the field.
Right.
I mean, more people had Otten and McMillan with no Baker Mayfield.
Right.
And way more people had Denver defense Javonte Williams. 7.3% of the entire field had the most expensive, a $3,700 defense with Javonte Williams. That's going to happen. And then you have the Love combinations. And then here's the combination that I didn't play because I thought they would be too owned, and I was right. The Winston Njoku Tillman combination was the highest owned three-man combination, just above Tua, Hill, and Waddle. I played plenty of Njoku, and I played a hell of a lot of Tillman. Jameis Winston was cheap, and originally he was in my mix. But then comparing lineups, like combinatorically, I just thought these guys would be higher. Like Tillman was projected to be like 12% owned, and I thought he would be 20%. Like I thought all these guys are going to be more owned because people wanted to play Jameis Winston, that I just chose not to play those lineups instead. And if we look at quarterback, Bo Nix, I didn't play any of because there was no. If I was going to play him, I would probably just play him naked. But the ones I played the most of was Kirk Cousins. Sure. I played Cousins plus London plus Pitts, which would have been better. Mooney over London. I played Burrow doubles because it's kind of weird that Chase and Yoshevich would be as high owned as they are, and Burrow would be only 5%, but be like this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna play. If I'm gonna play Chase, I'm gonna play Chase lineups because a lot of Chase lineups are gonna be one-off lineups, and I'm gonna play Burrow lineups with them. And the last one that I had a lot of, which I'm glad because he only came in at 2% owned, was Trevor Lawrence. Everyone's playing Jordan Love. I played Trevor Lawrence plus Brian Thomas plus Evan Ingram, and then used Jacobs in those lineups.
Yeah.
And that was actually my best performing lineup in the Millie. And it was at the point in the Millie, James, where you get the worst feeling. I consider the worst feeling in large field GPPs, especially the Millie.
Yeah.
It almost was. It wasn't, but it's almost. Where you check, it's like 3/4 of the way through the late games, and you check your highest performing lineup versus the top lineup.
Yeah.
And you go, well, this lineup has Josh Jacobs and James Conner in it. and you go, how many points behind first place is this lineup? Because James Conner could have been Devon Achane, and the point difference was like 12. And I'm like, this lineup is 18 points behind first place. And I'm like, okay.
Thank God.
Thank God. Right. That it's like, the one spot like that. And then the key we didn't touch on in wide receiver. The guy that I played the most of that came in really low owned compared to his projection. I don't know why. I can't even find him. Was Ladd McConkey at 3.3% owned, because before the Higgins injury that I wanted to put Chase in my cash lineups, I had Ladd McConkey in my cash lineup on DraftKings. His median projection was good. He just happened to be in a range at 5,100 at wide receiver that like lineups
no man's land.
Right, no man's land.
Yeah.
But that's only because of the Higgins injury. So like I was shocked when Ladd McConkey got the big pass and scored a touchdown. And it's like, oh, okay, let's, I must be doing well with a lot of other people. And then I finally checked. I'm like 3.3% owned. What are people doing?
I mean, I had him at like 8%. Like I didn't think that he was going to be owned.
I had him at like 10 to 12.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's fair. But like you just said, he was in no man's land. Right. Like if you're at 5,100 and you're looking at that and you're like, yeah, but I could have X player for 300 more or Y player for 500 less, or like whenever you land into those ranges, J.K. Dobbins was in a similar spot. He was 6,900, and you're looking at a $6,900 J.K. Dobbins, and you're just like, why wouldn't I just go a little bit cheaper for this guy, or why don't I go up a little bit to mix in? Like it, when you land in those no man's land spots, it's kind of very clear, I think, that somebody is going to be underowned. If I
and also James, the no man's like, dude, if you build a lineup full of no man and wide receivers, I mean, look at this: Ladd McConkey 5,100, 32 points, right? Calvin Ridley 5,200, 26 points, and you play a Bo Nix lineup and you stack it with Courtland Sutton 5,300, 21 points. Like, dude, if you play the no man's land wide receivers, and they're all, and look how low the ownership was.
Yeah. I thought that Ladd McConkey was kind of a lame play, so I wouldn't have landed on him. But like, regardless, right? I just think that no man's land spot. If I had all the time in the world and I didn't have a family and a 3.5-year-old, like, I think that projecting ownership would be a lot easier this year, because you can find spots like that where you're just like, yeah, this player is 4K and is projected for 25% ownership. This player is 5,600 and projected for 19% ownership. Anybody in between those guys, nothing. They're getting like 5% owned at most. You see it at the high end too. This player is 6,500 and projected for 20% ownership. This player is 7,500 and projected for 20% ownership. Anybody between 6,500 and 7,500 going to be like 5% owned. Like that, they will not get ownership. So I think that there's some really interesting ways to kind of go about that. I wish that I had the time, alas, I don't. But yeah,
look how odd this is. I mean, James, look at this. We go with these are the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. The top 11 scoring receivers. We're just doing 11 scoring receivers. Tillman was one of them, and he was 19% owned. At the other 10 were 4.2% or less. So like Ladd McConkey, 32 points, 3% owned. Ridley, 4% owned. Marvin Harrison at 6,800, 1% owned. Josh Downs, 1%. Shakir, 1%. Olave, 0.6%. Zay Flowers, 1.8%. Sutton, McLaurin with Daniels back at 6,900, 1.8%. Devonta Smith, 3.5%. The only weird one here that that makes, to me, I just don't get to. It's a $5,900 Khalil Shakir with his root participation the way it is. Everything else kind of it's like, okay, Marvin Harrison could have a big game, and Josh Downs, Richardson could, I guess, right? Whatever. Olave's back, right? I mean, Olave is Olave. But all of these are like I mean, like even the guys in the 6K, it's like it's like Tyreek Hill at 7K, Chase at 8,500, or the 3K guys, and then you have all these 6K level running backs. It's like, dude, you could have smashed buttons in the mid. If you just went to your computer and say, give me balanced builds, you may have just luck boxed into like these types of lineups.
I will say there's two things that I want to say about wide receiver ownership. One, I'm really surprised actually that Cortland Sutton was that low owned with how high Bo Nix was owned. I understand that a lot of people either went naked Bo Nix or just paired him with like Devon Belay.
Let me see. Can I find this? Let's go. Denver. There were more people. Okay, Nick Sutton was the highest at 0.6%.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
I mean, you have to figure how owned was Bo Nix. Let's go to this is how you use results DB. Let's see. Let's go to Bo Nix was about 9% owned.
Yeah.
So basically, you go to team stacks. Nix Williams was 1% of that. Nick Sutton was 0.6% of that. Nick's Denver defense. But yeah, I mean, Bo Nix, Troy Franklin, 0.4. Bo Nix, Devon Valet is 0.3. Like, I mean, really, a lot. I mean, I would say what this looks like about like 65% of lineups that had Bo Nix in it with just Bo Nix naked.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was a lot of talk of that. And honestly, I didn't think it was that bad of a play this week. I am surprised though that so many people ditched Cortland out of that. And then the second thing that I'll say about wide receiver ownership is the Cedric Tillman and Andre Ioshivis, however you pronounce this person's last name. Whatever. Yeah, Ioshivis. That just broke me. I saw that Cedric Tillman is 36% owned or whatever in the 150. Super tilting because I was like, yeah, Andre Ioshivis is an awful play and Cedric Tillman's a great play. And then apparently everybody agreed with me. Just decided to play Cedric Tillman. And it's like, okay, well, I'm glad that I was right and that everybody was right with me. But man, yeah, that was that would have been way nicer at 9% owned than 30% owned or whatever in the smaller fields.
I mean, the same thing with like what do you think of the stacks? Like as far as like you ain't playing Jordan Love stacks with how many options that team has at 12% owned. I mean, early in the week, I thought people personally, I thought people would stay away from Green Bay because like, well, you got Reed, you got Dobbs, you got Wicks, you got Watson, you got all these people there. I think Jordan Love is a great fantasy quarterback, but who do you stack him with? And if you're playing him at 7,100, you ain't playing him naked. Yeah. So, like, I didn't think it would be I really didn't think he would be the highest owned quarterback. I thought the highest owned quarterbacks were the ones that were there. I thought Lamar would be higher owned than he was at 4.7%. And Hurts was 3.5%. It's kind of odd. Another type of thing where McMillan and Otten, super owned, Baker Mayfield, 3.4% owned. Like that doesn't make any sense. But like dude, in SimLabs, like Trevor Lawrence was coming up. I mean, we had I don't have it up, our optimal stacks tool. Trevor Lawrence was one of the Trevor Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, and Joe Burrow were like in the top 5 of like optimal rate quarterbacks. So that's kind of why I played more of them. And I cashed in all of those. Like my best performing lineup was a Lawrence Engram Thomas one.
Right.
And my next best, I mean, I got a lot of lineups in like the top 5% in the Millie. And there were Cousins, London, Pitts lineups because Pitts did well. And Burrow, Chase, Eric All, right? A cheap tight end.
Sure.
Right. But I jammed in, Achane and Mixon and those types of lineups. So those did fine. I understand the Winston lineups. Like I'm not bagging on Winston. It's just that I predicted that Winston would be this owned. And that combination of Tillman and Njoku would be combinatorically this owned. I think the projected ownership was half of what came in. And I just predicted that it would come in like this. And I did play some Tua lineups, but I tried to play Tua, Hill, Jonnu Smith type lineups rather than the Waddle Hill combination, both at wide receiver. And then I was considering playing Caleb Williams lineups earlier in the week, but once Jaden Daniels was ruled in,
right,
I didn't like I thought with Mariota at quarterback, the Bears would be more positioned to get more possession and more plays. But once Jaden Daniels was in, the team total started coming down. But if you did play Caleb Williams lineups, I don't think that's bad, because I considered that beforehand also.
Sure. Yeah. I think I really liked Baltimore stacks. I really liked Cleveland stacks. So to be clear, I think that Cleveland stacks, even at their ownership, were probably still fine. Just because they were so cheap and they were in such a good game environment. That being said, I did write plenty of times, like, the reason why Bo Nix was getting ownership that Jameis Winston wasn't, like, in ownership projections, is because the team total for the Broncos was like 25 or something, and the team total for Cleveland was 16.75. I mean, that's reserved for like New England games, right? Like that's a really low team total, and I do think that it's important to consider that kind of thing when you're doing this. Like, if I'm going to play a highly volatile lineup, I'd like the highly volatile lineup to have the backing of Vegas a little bit, like a little bit of top down, right? But I mean, Jordan Love ownership, he came in about where I expected him to be, but I never considered them. I thought they were okay, but on this slate, I didn't really see a reason to go with a Jordan Love to Jaden Reed and Tucker. Like, it just it didn't make sense to me. I thought I thought that the recipe this week was mostly either you're going to pay way down at quarterback with a cheap wide receiver one, aka a Cleveland stack, or a Bo Nix with the Devon Valet or something like that, or you're going to pay way up and you're going to go either Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson and pair them with their tight ends so you can take priority position, and then pair them with their wide receiver one. Either one of those.
I had a Hurts. I had two Hurts, AJ Brown, Calcaterra lineups. I mean, that was fine.
Yeah. Those made sense, and those probably did pretty well. I thought that was just the way to build. So these kind of, like, Joe Burrow, I liked Cincinnati stacks, but then when I got down to actually like kind of looking into it, I was like, this is kind of a weird spot with Andre Yoshivas and Jamar Chase now. Like, I didn't like it as much after T. Higgins got scratched. And like, I was okay with CJ Stroud in a good spot, but then it's like, well, does this offense kind of suck without Nico Collins? Like, I don't. And then when it came down to the pricing, I just didn't like lineups as much that were using a QB between 6,500 and 7K. I just didn't. So it just ended up being like, I'm going to pay either way up or way down. And that ended up being what I wrote up as the way that you should build. And that ended up being the way that you need to build for the slate. So that feels pretty good.
The thesis of playing Bo Nix was that, okay, Bo Nix, not good, but he runs the ball. He's a rushing quarterback. He will rush the ball. He will scramble and he will run for some yards, right? 5 rushing yards. But fortunately, he played the Carolina Panthers and he turned into, Peyton Manning on the Broncos, because the Panthers apparently can't play any defense. So like he could throw for numerous touchdowns in that spot anyway. Moving forward, if Bo Nix could score nearly 30 fantasy points against the Carolina Panthers, I think playing any team against the Panthers defense is a good heuristic, and it's going to be tested. We'll preview it on Wednesday. It's going to be tested next week, because now we're going to get the Saints versus the Panthers. And this is how bad the Panthers are. The Saints, who had to bench Spencer Rattler mid-game, they got Olave back, even though Shaheed is out. The Saints are 6.5-point favorites. And I think they're road favorites.
They're away. Yeah. They're away.
Saints are 6.5-point road favorites over the Panthers.
I mean, so Bryce Young is not even a practice squad level quarterback. He's not even like good enough. If he were traded to another team, he would go the way of Desmond Ridder. I think Desmond Ridder is a better quarterback than Bryce Young is. And Desmond Ridder could not beat out the backup QB for the Cardinals, and whoever the hell he got traded to. I don't remember who he got traded to, but he got demoted like instantly. He didn't even make it out of training camp. Bryce Young would legit. I don't even think Bryce Young could beat like a third string quarterback. I think he would instantly.
They have no receivers. Deontay Johnson's out. I mean, they got like
no. Look. There are. One of the most damning things was that first game with Andy Dalton, where the Panthers looked not good but competent. We're not even talking. The Panthers looked like a 6-12 team with Andy Dalton. Okay. They looked like they could win games. Not a lot of games, but some games. You put Bryce Young back in there, and this team cannot function at all. He is, and here's the thing. He's too short. He has to stand on his tippy toes to throw the freaking ball.
Well, Kyler Murray does it. Why Kyler Murray could do it? Why can't Bryce
Kyler Murray runs out of the pocket? Kyler Murray has a little bit better. He has a more athletic arm. Kyler Murray is an athlete.
What the hell's an athletic arm?
Kyler Murray is an athlete. Kyler Murray was going to be a baseball player. Like, he can throw. Right? Okay. Like Bryce Young, he doesn't have the power arm. He doesn't have the legs. He doesn't have the height. He is.
Why did they trade for a million things for him?
Because they're stupid. Because they're terrible at what they do. Because because the owners are awful at what they do. There were so many people, so many smart people that were just like, oh yeah, Bryce Young, he's not gonna translate. There were so many smart people, and those smart people got drowned out by all the hype around Bryce Young for whatever reason. I don't even remember why, but he is an abject failure as a quarterback. That team cannot operate. So any team up against the Panthers should be a favorite. Another stat that I thought was hilarious: going into week 8, running backs were averaging 41 yards above average against the Panthers defense. Okay. That means most running backs in the league, like 28 starting running backs in the league, would average 100 rushing yards a game against the Panthers defense. Javonte Williams failed, but you can use any position against the Panthers right now. Anything. The entire slot. QB, running back, wide receiver, defense for sure. You can use whatever you want. The Panthers are a failure of an organization. Just awful.
While you're diagnosing quarterbacks,
yeah.
What's wrong with Anthony Richardson?
He's okay. So I think that I did a whole thread on this. I love QB breakdowns. Anthony Richardson has all the physical tools to be Josh Allen.
Does he have an athletic arm? That's the key. Does he have an athletic? I don't know what that is, but he
has a howitzer. He has a howitzer for an arm. He can launch that thing. He has all the athletic tools to be like a Josh Allen type of quarterback, but it seems that he might be an idiot, which is unfortunate. And it seems that he might be, excuse my language, a bit of a pussy, because he took himself out of the game because he was out of breath in the third quarter. Cut him. just cut him. What are we doing here? You can't take yourself out of a game the game was close enough. This isn't even like a big blowout. It was within 2 touchdowns. And he's just like, I went up to Steichen and I told him, yo, man, I need a breather. Can you put in Joe Flacco? You want to put in Joe Flacco because you're out of breath? Cut him.
But that's probably better for the team. Flacco.
It probably is better for the team. So go ahead and just cut Anthony Richardson. I think he has all the physical tools. But here's the 3 things you need to be a QB. You need to have two of these 3 things in the NFL. You need to have the physical tools, you need to have the smarts, or you need to have the leadership. You need 2 of those 3. You can be an incredible leader and an incredibly smart person, and that's one archetype that works. You can have incredible physical tools and be an incredible leader. That's another thing that works. Or you can have incredible physical tools and be very smart, but be a dickhead. And that's another one that works. But you can't only have one of the 3. Otherwise, you're a backup. And if you have none of the 3, like Bryce Young, you should be selling insurance. You shouldn't be in the NFL. So that's kind of some armchair quarterback breakdowns here. I think Anthony Richardson can be okay. Remember that Josh Allen was like really bad his first year. And we're still kind of seeing Anthony Richardson in a very this is still technically his rookie year because of injuries. But man, he needs like some really good coaching to not be a millennial about it and just like take himself out of games, or he needs some grit, man. He doesn't have any grit. No grit. He has no grit.
Last quarterback to break down.
Yeah.
At what point in the season does Aaron Rodgers just start his own conspiracy podcast and then just take the last couple of weeks off of the regular season?
He's going to get injured, quote unquote, injured like week 12 or something. That week after being injured, he will go on who's that podcast that he always goes on? It's the old punter.
Well, he goes on McAfee. He goes on McAfee, right?
McAfee, thank you. Yeah. He'll go on McAfee the day after being injured and start blasting the team for no reason. He'll start talking shit about everyone on the team. And then in 3 weeks, let's see, what week 12, we just did week 8, right? So 4. Right. Okay. That will be after the election. So I'm sure that there will be plenty of content for him to talk about, right? And then 2 weeks after he gets injured in week 12, he's going to have his own podcast. So by week 14, to answer your question, by week 14, he will have his own podcast. And he is not going to return in 2026. Like he's just going to retire for sure.
And his co-host is going to be, I forgot who is the slot receiver for the Bills?
Cole Beasley.
Yeah, Cole Beasley. Like it'll be him and Cole Beasley. Right.
It's going to be Cole Beasley, Aaron Rodgers, and RFK Jr. hanging out, talking about brain worms. It'll be sick.
And the Jets will be 5-13.
Yeah. And the Jets will be 5-13, and for whatever reason, they'll maintain their GM and all the coaches because who the fuck cares? It's all the money in the world. Doesn't matter.
James, you put out at PayDirt, you put out a newsletter every day called the Breadcrumbs that people should subscribe to. How would they do that?
You could go over to paydirtdfs.com. You can go to the member dropdown and you can find it's under the content dropdown now. You can go into the content dropdown and there's a newsletter sign up. I'm going to put together a breakdown of the last main slate, send that out in about 2.5 hours or so. So got plenty of time to see that. And then, if you want to follow all the other stuff that I do, paydirtdfs.com and follow me on Twitter at paydirt_DFS.
Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. Hit that subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to always know when we go live. Remember, later today, we got NBA Grinders Live, followed by Crunch Time for NBA. Then we got the NFL Pre-Lock Show. We got a whole ton of shows on the YouTube channel later tonight. Sign up for RotoGrinders Premium. You get a combo premium with everything. You get our statistical projections, which you can use for prop betting also. Props in the pick'em sites, Underdog, and Prize Picks. So, all the information is below. You can get $40 off your first month. Click on that link in the description. I will be back tomorrow. We'll be talking NBA, right? Because that's back. And then Wednesday, we'll do a preview of week 9 in the NFL. Then Thursday, NFL props and pick'em. And then Friday, GPP strategy for NFL week 9. Whole tons of content here in the end of October because I'm with you every day, Monday through Friday, 11 o'clock Eastern. Talking about all things you're thinking about in daily fantasy, props and pick'em on RotoGrinders Today.